This study was done by Ben Levine out of UT Southwest in Dallas. And it's a really, to me, it's seminal, groundbreaking study that isn't talked about enough. By the way, he's just a phenomenal cardiovascular exercise physiologist. I mean, he trained with the biggest giants out there. And what he did was him and his lab took 50-year-olds that were sedentary. So they're middle age, 50 years old, sedentary but otherwise healthy. So you didn't have any other diseases besides being sedentary, which I think is a disease. But they didn't have any other diseases like cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes or hypertension, right? So they were otherwise healthy, just not active. And he wanted to see if he could put these guys on a pretty long 2-year training protocol. How would that affect the aging of their heart? So as we age, our hearts typically shrink in size and they get stiffer. And that affects not only our cardiorespiratory fitness and our ability to exercise, and I mentioned our cardiorespiratory fitness goes down with age, but it affects our cardiovascular disease risk as well. And so the reason our hearts get stiffer, by the way, does come down to a lot of glucose. So the more glucose stimulation, more glucose is around in your vascular system, it, through a chemical reaction, forms advanced glycation end products. So this glycation essentially stiffens the collagen that surrounds your myocardium and your pericardium. And so you get like this stiffer heart that can't respond to stress well, So you want your heart to be very plastic and malleable and flexible, right? You don't want it to be stiff.
Doesn't sound good.
Just like you don't want your blood vessels to be stiff. What he wanted to do was see if he could change the structure and the trajectory of these aging hearts. And so he put them on a 2-year training program, which involved the Norwegian 4x4, by the way. And when you start someone out that's, not physically active and you want them to do the Norwegian 4x4, when you have them doing their interval, their 4-minute interval, and this speaks to you as well, or anyone, you don't have to necessarily go as hard as you can the whole 4 minutes. You just have to be working hard that interval.
Yeah, you do have to last 4 minutes, right? So
you have to last 4 minutes. And so some people even start off, they're just briskly walking because that's hard for them, right?
Yeah, totally.
So it's all tailored to the individual. And so some people get really intimidated where they're like, there's no way I could ever do that. Well, actually, these people did do it. And they started out doing Norwegian 4x4, but they also did a variety of other exercises, including moderate intensity and some more vigorous intensity exercise, as well as some resistance training. And the control group was just this like yoga, flexible training sort of stuff that people were doing. By the end of the 2 years, these people were working out about 5 hours a week. And at some point, they were doing 2 Norwegian 4x4s a week, and then they went down to just doing 1 a week. But, over the course of 2 years, they were getting a lot of exercise, about 5 hours a week. And essentially, at the end of those 2 years, the structure of their heart, so the stiffness of it and the shrinking of it, was reversed. So their hearts grew and they became more flexible. And it was reversed in such a way that it was 20 years less aging. So their hearts looked more like 30-year-olds than 50-year-olds, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's also like, well, you think 50, it's too late to start exercising. Well, it's not too late. You can be in your 90s and get benefits. I think that's another really important sort of take home with that story is that, you can reverse your aging of your heart by 20 years if you really put in the effort. Five hours a week is about what I do. About 5 or 6 hours a week. It's a lot of work. I didn't always do that, but I've decided as I started to get into my mid-40s, I'm going to spend less time podcasting and more time exercising because this is my health.
Okay. So in a bit, we're going to, and especially also tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about some of these methods that you can use so you don't have to put in 5 hours per week, but you can get this down to about 10 or 20 minutes per week of exercise. I've been doing this for the past number of months, and my daughter Kelly and I and our research team, we've been working with a scientist at a university that I'm not going to mention because of confidentiality, but he discovered this method when working with Olympic athletes about how to do very short, intense exercise to maximize your efforts and see these very dramatic anti-aging effects in the heart and the cardiovascular system. When I started this, I was using this exercise bike that is specifically designed for this method of training, and I was producing about 650 watts output on this bike, which is good. But then over a very short period of time, I went up to 786 watts of output power, which is equivalent to a competitive athlete. It's not bad for a 62-year-old, right? The other thing I thought that was really important was that 1 horsepower is 750 watts. So now apparently I produce more energy than a horse. Without the big gigantic ass that a horse has, which I'm delighted about. Okay, so how can we, let's go back to the subject we were talking about before. How can we define what aging is? We've looked at the signs and the symptoms of aging, but now let's see if we can put some definition about this. So if we look at the literature, we can go ask AI. One of the theories or the models of aging is that we're programmed to die at a certain age. So this is called the biological clock model, and it simply means that genes change their expression. Certain genes that are on get flipped off, or genes that are flipped off get flipped on over time. Hormones regulate the pace of aging. We know that hormones will change over time in both men and women. The immune system is programmed to decline over a time. That's another theory that's out there. Cells wear out over time. Telomeres shorten. Telomere biology is probably one of the principal areas that researchers look in. So when we're speaking with scientists in the field of anti-aging or age reversal, many of them strictly focus on telomere biology. And then scientists like Dr. Aubrey de Grey, they focus principally on how to eliminate zombie cells from the body. And they're principally looking at creating drugs that do this. All the while, we know that fasting will remove zombie cells from the body, and a nutrient that is found in peppers called fisetin, that will also facilitate removal of zombie cells. So we can use natural means. We don't have to rely on drugs to do this. And then the DNA mutations that occur over time. Again, this is all addressable. If we keep our glutathione levels elevated as one strategy, we can help to protect our cells from mutating genes. So these are many theories on aging. What can we do to simplify this? Aging can be understood from this simple perspective, is that over time, the amount of energy in our cells declines. So we should be looking at strategies to increase energy. The amount of information that makes us who we are declines over time. So this all has to do with, are you doing things on a daily basis to essentially tell your body that you're alive, you're young, and you're youthful? Are you having a clean, healthy diet that contributes to your overall health? Are you exercising to keep those genes expressing in a more youthful state? Are you hydrating the body? Are you using technology like LifeWave to improve the body of information in the cells? So this is important because if we take this complex subject and we distill it down into this simple principle, which is very easy to understand, now we can develop strategies, we can develop technology to turn older cells into younger, healthier cells. So let's look at a few of these things. And I often use this example because it's something that doesn't cost any money and it's good for the planet, meaning we should all live in a state of love and kindness. If we live in a state of love and kindness, this has an immediate benefit on our own health is that that's been demonstrated to reduce stress. Secondly, this boosts oxytocin. And as you can see in these visuals, oxytocin, doesn't matter if you're 70 or 80 years old, you will get the benefit of reversing the age of the muscle tissue back to a more youthful state. So we talked about the biodome a little bit earlier, and the reason, again, to bring this up is that the principles involved in stopping and reversing human aging is essentially the same as in regeneration. So we have a very exciting future to look forward to, is that not only we can conquer human aging, but also should we get injured in the years to come, that we can use these same strategies so we don't have to have an artificial limb. We can get our own limb back, or we can get a liver back, or a heart, or a kidney, or what have you. It's all possible to regenerate. So now we look at the very foundation of how it is that we are able to function. And we look at the nucleus of the cell. And what we find is that if you take cells and you put them in an environment that's completely dark and use a photomultiplier tube, you will see that there are highly coherent pulses of light coming out of the cells. And these are not random emission of light, but rather each wavelength of light is triggering a specific biochemical reaction. So as Becker found in the 60s, it's the energy systems in the body that control the biochemistry. And so this is very important for us to understand, because it means that if we have a healthy diet and we get all of the raw materials that we need to maintain our health, we can use technology, we can use light in its various manifestations to improve our health in some very powerful ways. So light is the main orchestration by which everything else happens in the body. So we'll go back to our testosterone examples here, because we're in California and I know some men want to elevate their testosterone. Instead of having to get an injection of testosterone, get it exogenously, we can simply go out in the sun, take our shirts off, and expose the androgen receptors in our trapezius muscles to ultraviolet light, and that will increase testosterone production, in addition to vitamin D. So, ladies, if you ever wondered why men are exceptionally horny in the summer, you have to look no further at a beach where men don't have any shirts on, and this is the explanation. It's not an excuse, but it's the explanation. Okay. So the question becomes, how can we use light in a way to stop and reverse human aging? So we have been doing these experiments now for well over 10 years. And the place this started was to take an ordinary metal like tin. Now, we've done this with aluminum, we've done this with copper and bismuth, a variety of other metals, but I'm just going to use tin as an example. And if we take tin and we expose it to oxygen, this could be pure oxygen, or even just there's enough oxygen in the ambient air, and we expose it to heat, we get a normal tin oxide. There's nothing unusual about that. However, if we were to use electromagnetic energy, and we were to introduce the electromagnetic energy during this process while the oxygen is binding to the metal, what we found is that we can create an entirely new species of metal oxide that never existed before. And this is something that I received a number of patents on. So this reminds me of Steve Jobs. You know one thing I didn't like about Steve Jobs? This is kind of like from a Bill Burr joke, so I'm going to borrow it. But what I didn't like about Steve Jobs is he always went out on stage by himself and took credit for everything, right? Walked out there in a t-shirt, no socks, like it was no biggie, right? And he never gave credit to his engineers. Well, we have one of our engineers today who has been our chief engineer at our laboratory. I just want to recognize him for a moment, Mr. George Sanchez. Give him a nice round of applause. So George has been with me now for more than 15 years. I think we're going on 17 years together. And I come up with all these crazy ideas, and George is the best computer programmer, CAD designer that you will ever find. So I come in and say, hey, George, you know, here is a scratch of an invention. He looks at it and says, yeah, I think I can design that. He'll design it in the computer. We print a model on a 3D printer. We take it to the machine shop that we have, and now all of a sudden we have a working invention. So this came as a result of a collaboration between Big George and I. So what we found, and here's the really interesting part. So keep in mind, we're taking a metal and we're taking oxygen, and we're bringing them together to form something that never existed before, and we're doing that by embedding light, or we're using electromagnetism to change the angle at which the metal and the oxygen bind to one another. And when we change the frequency or the wavelength of light, the color of the metal changes. So we can produce something that looks like gold, red, orange, blues, purples, all by using energy. And then we send these out to labs, and what we find is that these materials never existed before, and they have some really interesting applications. So why is this important? Why am I sharing this with you? It's because hydrogen has a metallic state. And if we think of hydrogen as a metal, and we think about it with respect to these experiments, it means if we took hydrogen and we took oxygen, and during their formation we used electromagnetism or light, we might be able to create an entirely new species of water that never existed before. So this was the genesis, this was the beginning of X2O. And those initial laboratory experiments were incredibly rewarding, but it has taken us a long time to take that from a laboratory experiment to equipment that we could actually put into something we could manufacture. And there's been a lot of stumbling blocks along the way. But fortunately, we've gotten there now. So that's what X2O is all about. So one of the questions is, if we have a new technology now for creating a new type of water that never existed before, what wavelengths of light should we use and why? Well, this is where we look to nature. So if we can understand how certain species, like lobster, are defying the aging process, and we know that it's light that all living systems are using for communication, that means if we can understand this biological code, or as we call it, the code of creation, if we could understand this biological code, that means we can put those wavelengths of light that are responsible for a species' biological immortality, we can put that into water. And if we put that into water and human beings can consume it, That means the water goes everywhere throughout the body, so now we have a way of delivering light throughout the entire body. So we look at spectrophotometry data and studies that have been done on lobster, and we see that one of the critical wavelengths of light is 550 nanometers. We see there's another interesting peak of light between 700 and 710 nanometers, and we also know that from stem cell experiments that we've done that 630 nanometer light is critical for energy production and mobilization of stem cells. So 550, 710, 630. That's the code that lobsters are using. Last night, I had the opportunity to share with you the code that is found in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. We see the numbers 999, 888, 777. And we see the ratios of one number to another. These are the same ratios. So when God was creating all things, he put his signature in light into species that are immortal as a sign of his existence. So this is normal distilled water that we freeze, and we put this in a beaker, and you can see there's nothing unusual about it, it's just normal ice. However, when we take water from X2O, water that is infused with light, it adopts a very specific structure. It becomes highly coherent. And as a matter of fact, the water implodes and releases energy. So you can see that there is these highly organized crystal threads that implode like a vortex. We even see a vortex funnel form inside of this ice. It's the same formation we see in all living systems. So this is what this process looks like over time. We take distilled water, doesn't matter what type of water it is, but you get slightly different effects depending on the type of water. But we use distilled water because it's a control. But you can see we process this now for 2.5 hours, 3.25 hours, and you can see the water is imploding and forming this beautiful egg-shaped vortex funnel in the center, and the ice threads are moving closer. Interestingly, the longer that we process the water becomes so coherent that it becomes crystal clear like glass. So let's show a quick video of what this looks like. So we see the water, as it freezes, forms these crystal threads. This is evidence that these are highly coherent structures, not random oscillations, chaotic oscillations as you would find in normal ice. And then we get this vortex bubble that forms in the center. So this is a pattern that we see in nature around all living systems, and we've duplicated that in the water that you now can drink. Okay. All right, let's continue on. Okay, so what happens when we drink this water? Simply, the studies that we have now on X2O show that when you drink this water, within the first 15 seconds, there's a measurable increase in bioelectrical activity of the body. Many people will experience this as an improvement in circulations. Those of you that have tried it, you know that you can feel this rush of energy that goes up into your head. You experience improvements in cognition, in awareness. Some people experience a buzzing effect in the frontal lobes and around the eyes. So we get a very pronounced bioelectrical effect within seconds of drinking the water. That's measurable. 100% I think it's really cool. 100% of the people that drink this have a measurable change. So we have an incredible product to market. When we do urine testing, amongst urine testing, blood tests, we see measurable changes in the metabolism. And a pattern begins to form when we look at which amino acids specifically are being metabolized. So glycine, which of course is part of copper peptide, part of glutathione, increases in metabolism from consuming X2O. Valine, one of the branched chain amino acids necessary for muscle protein synthesis, that increases when consuming X2O. Proline, which is, as we know, foundational for collagen production, and collagen production is foundational for longevity, increases when we consume X2O. And then leucine, of course, which activates mTOR for muscle protein synthesis. Those of you that are athletes will notice that when you consume X2O, as long as you're taking enough protein and getting enough exercise, you'll see you'll build muscle faster with X2O. And then importantly, because we're talking about longevity, we see that X2O activates the KP pathway, which turns on production of NAD, which again is a key molecule in anti-aging and age reversal. Interestingly, in vitro work that we've done with X2O has shown an increased production of NAD in the fibroblasts, which is what makes collagen. Users report, of course, improved energy, what someone experienced with X2O, improvements in energy, which lasts 3 to 5 hours, improvements in cognition, improvements in eyesight. These aren't necessarily all things that we're going to be making claims about, because we're not going to make medical claims, but general improvements in overall health and wellness, which lasts for many hours. So life is about energy and information. X2O infuses water with light that stimulates energy production throughout the body. And this is the first time there's been a technology available where we can put light inside the body and have it go everywhere needed. So we're in the perfect place to market this product and help millions of people around the world.